Today's story is for those people who stand alone when the world believes they have finally broken. Today's story is Eleanor's, a woman who sat completely alone in that courtroom. No attorney beside her, no family behind her, no hand on her shoulder, no one whispering, "We are here." And Maxwell, her ex-husband, sat in that room as if the victory had already happened. But Maxwell Voss did not know one thing. A woman who comes from the Hartwell bloodline is never truly alone. She simply waits. Today, that waiting ends. The camera finds her first. Eleanor Voss Hartwell, sitting alone at the petitioner's table. There is no attorney beside her. There is no family in the gallery behind her. There is no hand on her shoulder, no whispered "you are going to be fine" in her ear. There is only Eleanor, and the stillness around her is so complete, so perfectly, painfully absolute, that it draws the eye the way an empty stage draws the eye, because something enormous is supposed to be there, and its absence is its own kind of devastating presence. She sits with her back straight, her hands folded on the table before her, not clasped tightly, not trembling, but folded. Composed, a woman who has decided that if she is going to be left standing alone, she will at least be standing correctly. Across the aisle, the respondent's table. Maxwell Voss sits flanked by his attorney Roland Ashford and a junior associate. Behind them in the gallery, Diana, polished and proprietary, already watching Eleanor with barely concealed amusement. Maxwell's business partners occupy 2 full rows. His personal assistant, his publicist. Maxwell does not look at Eleanor right away. He does not need to. He is already laughing at something Roland has said. A low, private laugh. The laugh of men who believe a thing is already settled. His cufflinks catch the courtroom light when he gestures. Then he turns, and he looks at Eleanor, alone at her table, without a single person behind her. And something in his expression shifts, not into sympathy, into satisfaction. He leans slightly toward Roland and says something else. Roland smiles. Diana, in the gallery, tilts her head and whispers to the woman beside her. And Eleanor sees all of it. Every whisper, every glance, every small private celebration of her isolation happening in real time right in front of her, as if she is already invisible. She breathes in through her nose. Slow, measured. Her storm-gray eyes fix forward on the judge's bench. And she waits. Judge Dorothea Crane enters, and the courtroom rises. Judge Crane takes her seat and surveys the room with the practiced calm of a woman who has seen every variety of human catastrophe this world produces. Her gaze settles briefly on Eleanor, alone at her table, and something moves behind her glasses. A small, private note. She says nothing. You may be seated. The proceedings begin. Roland Ashford rises first. He is the kind of man who has perfected the art of making cruelty sound like reason, who delivers devastating things in a voice so measured and mild that the damage is halfway done before anyone realizes what has happened. Your Honor, he begins, adjusting his jacket with the unhurried ease of absolute certainty. The respondent, Mr. Maxwell Voss, has provided comprehensive documentation, financial records, property assessments, and business evaluations, all confirming that the petitioner's claims regarding marital asset division are frankly without legal foundation. He pauses, lets it settle. Furthermore, we note for the record that the petitioner has chosen to represent herself today. He says represent herself the way one might say arrived on foot, technically neutral, and yet somehow deeply precisely unkind. A ripple moves through the gallery. Whispers. Maxwell keeps his eyes forward, but the corner of his mouth moves. Diana shifts in her seat, recrosses her legs. She is enjoying this. Eleanor does not flinch. She picks up her pen. She writes a note on the legal pad before her. Her handwriting is clean and even. Furthermore, Roland continues, it is the respondent's position that Mrs. Voss Hartwell's contributions to the marital estate have been substantially overstated in her petition. The court will note the petitioner's name correctly, Judge Crane says, without looking up from her papers. Her voice is a single, flat note of correction. Roland barely breaks stride. Of course, Your Honor. Mrs. Voss Hartwell's contributions, Maxwell's corner of the mouth. Another fraction of a smile. When it is Eleanor's turn to address the court, she rises. And the gallery, Maxwell's gallery, every row of it, watches her the way people watch something they believe is about to fail publicly and completely. She speaks clearly, precisely. She has prepared every single word herself, researched precedent, reviewed statutes, organized documentation that would have taken a legal team weeks to compile. Her voice does not waver. But Roland objects. 3 times. Each objection is technically valid. Each one clips Eleanor's argument at its knees before it can rise to full height. Judge Crane sustains 2 of the 3. The petitioner will refrain from, understood, Your Honor. Eleanor sits back down. In the gallery behind Maxwell, his business partner leans toward the man beside him and says something. Both men smile. Diana opens her compact and checks her lipstick, a gesture so deliberately dismissive it is almost theatrical in its cruelty. During the recess, Eleanor walks alone to the water fountain at the end of the corridor. She stands there for a moment, cup in hand, watching the water. 2 women from Maxwell's side pass behind her. Voices low, but not low enough. She doesn't even have a lawyer. What was she thinking? She never had anyone. That was always the thing about Eleanor. She thought love was enough of a foundation to build on. The footsteps recede. Eleanor sets the paper cup down. She presses one hand flat against the cool tile wall. And for just a moment, just one, her composure wavers. Her eyes close. Her jaw tightens. Because she knows something that no one in this building knows yet. She has been alone here. Completely, visibly, devastatingly alone, not because she has no one, but because she made a choice. Because she told them not to come. Because she believed, with every degree of dignity she possessed, that she could do this herself. She was wrong about the courtroom. She was not wrong about her family. The Hartwell name is not a name you see on billboards. It is not a name attached to celebrity or spectacle or the kind of wealth that announces itself loudly to the room. The Hartwell name is older than that. It is the kind of power that does not need to be advertised. It is the kind of name that appears on the founding charters of universities, on the deed records of land that has been in one family for 6 generations, on the quiet donor walls of hospitals and courthouses and libraries where no one thinks to ask who built them. Clarence Hartwell built his fortune the way his father built it before him, with patience, with discipline, and with the absolute conviction that a person's word is either worth everything or worth nothing. And there is no comfortable middle ground between the two. He was 43 years old when Eleanor was born. He held her in the delivery room for 4 full minutes before he trusted anyone else to take her. And in those 4 minutes, those who were present said, he did not speak a single word. He simply looked at her, this small, serious-faced infant with her mother's dark hair and his own gray eyes, and made a decision that would govern the rest of his life. Eleanor would lack nothing. Not education, not opportunity, not the knowledge of who she was and where she came from. Margaret Hartwell learned early that the world did not offer women what it freely gave to men, so she had spent 70 years taking it anyway, piece by calculated piece. She had built the family's legal trust structure herself at an age when most women of her generation were told their role was decorative. She had sat across tables from men who dismissed her and outlasted every single one of them. She was the first person who truly recognized Maxwell Voss for what he was. It was Thanksgiving. Maxwell had been in the family's orbit for 3 months. He sat at the long dinner table in the Hartwell estate, that centuries-old stone house in Connecticut, with its 12-foot ceilings and its portraits of people who had built things that lasted. And he smiled too quickly, laughed too readily at Clarence's jokes, and paid Margaret the particular kind of excessive attention that men pay to powerful elders when they are performing respect rather than genuinely feeling it. Margaret watched him for 4 hours. After dinner, while Eleanor cleared plates in the kitchen, Margaret stood in the doorway of the sitting room where Maxwell was examining a piece of art on the wall. A small oil painting, 19th century, extraordinary value. He was turning it slightly, as if quietly assessing what it might fetch somewhere. She said nothing. She simply watched. And she remembered. 1 week before the trial, Eleanor sat in the Hartwell Estate library, on the phone. "Papa, please don't come." A long silence on the other end of the line. "Eleanor, I need to do this myself." Her voice is even. Decided, I need to walk into that room and face him on my own terms. If you are there, if any of you are there, it becomes about the family, about the name, and I want him to answer for what he did to me. Just me. Another silence. Clarence Hartwell's voice, when it comes, is quiet and immovable as bedrock. "You have 3 days, Eleanor. If you call me before those 3 days are done, I will be in that courtroom within the hour. You understand?" "Yes." "And if those 3 days pass and I have not heard from you, Papa, your grandmother and I will be there on day 4. With Victor. With counsel. Whether you want us or not." Eleanor closes her eyes on her end of the call. She said yes. She said it knowing exactly what it meant. She said it knowing she was choosing something exquisitely painful, the appearance of total isolation, because she wanted, just once, to stand in the same room as Maxwell Voss, without his knowing the full weight of everything that stood behind her. She wanted him confident. She wanted him certain. She wanted him to believe, with every fiber of his expensive, shallow certainty, that he had finally reduced her to nothing. Because what comes after nothing is so much more powerful than anything he has ever faced in his life. Eleanor always was her grandmother's granddaughter. Maxwell Voss has decided that today is a celebration. He does not say this explicitly. Maxwell Voss has learned in 46 years of maneuvering through the world that explicit statements are for people who lack subtlety. He communicates his certainty through posture, through the angle of his jaw, through the way he leans back in his chair between arguments with the comfortable ease of a man watching something go exactly as planned. He whispers to Roland. Roland nods. Numbers are referenced, figures from discovery, asset valuations, business projections that Roland has constructed with considerable skill to minimize, diminish, and reduce everything Eleanor built. Eleanor's petition asks for recognition of 17 years of marital contribution, not merely financial, but foundational. The early years when Maxwell's first company was failing and Eleanor restructured the accounting, wrote the investor pitch, sat across tables from venture capitalists, and made them believe in a man she genuinely, completely loved. Roland's counter-narrative reduces all of that to sentiment. The petitioner's contributions, while appreciated by my client on a personal level, do not meet the legal threshold for, Eleanor writes on her legal pad. Her pen moves steadily and without hesitation. She is not writing notes on Roland's argument. She is writing a list, names, numbers, reference citations. She has been quietly building something this entire time, in plain sight, and no one has noticed. Judge Crane is watching Eleanor's face. The judge has presided over thousands of cases. She has seen the full taxonomy of human emotion in her courtroom: rage, grief, desperation, performance, collapse. She knows the difference between a person who has been defeated and a person who is waiting for the right moment. Eleanor Voss Hartwell is waiting. Maxwell's phone, silenced on the table, lights up once. A text from his publicist. He glances at it. Whatever it says makes the corner of his mouth rise again. He is so certain. It is almost something worth watching. Outside the courthouse, on the wide stone steps, a long black car has been parked for the past 40 minutes. Then a second one arrives. The drivers sit with professional stillness, engines off, waiting. On the third floor of the building, a security guard at the rear entrance accepts credentials from a tall man in a navy suit. He reviews them carefully, then reviews them again, and then steps quietly aside. He will later tell his colleagues that he has never seen paperwork quite like that, or a family quite like the one that filed quietly through that corridor. The afternoon session continues. Eleanor writes her notes. The clock on the courtroom wall moves, and in the long stone corridor outside the heavy courtroom doors, the sound of deliberate, unhurried, deeply purposeful footsteps begins. Rolling dashboard stands. Your Honor, at this time the respondent would like to submit Exhibit 47, a comprehensive financial analysis prepared by our expert witness, Dr. Gerald Fitch, certified forensic accountant, demonstrating that the petitioner's claims regarding her contributions to Voss Enterprises during the period in question are substantially overstated. Dr. Fitch takes the stand. He speaks for 22 minutes. He is thorough. He is credentialed. His numbers are precise, and they are constructed with considerable skill to tell a story that is technically accurate and fundamentally dishonest. The way a photograph can show only the beautiful part of a ruined room and call itself the truth. When he finishes, Roland says, "No further questions," with the satisfied tone of a man setting down a winning card on a table he believes is already his. Judge Crane turns to Eleanor. Does the petitioner wish to cross-examine the witness? Eleanor stands. She is, in this moment, one woman against an entire machine, against a legal team and a financial expert in a courtroom full of people who have already quietly decided the outcome. She has no co-counsel, no one beside her, no one in the gallery behind her. She asks 3 questions. They are precise, clinical. They expose one small but significant inconsistency in Dr. Fitch's methodology, the way you find one loose thread in a garment and pull it carefully until the seam begins to show. Dr. Fitch pauses, reconsiders, acknowledges the inconsistency with careful professional reluctance. It is not enough, not yet, not alone. Judge Crane calls a brief recess. Eleanor sits back down at her empty table, and this time, this one time, her composure breaks. Not catastrophically, not in the way of a person collapsing dramatically. In the quiet, private, absolutely heartbreaking way of a person who has been holding something unbearable for a very long time and has finally reached the edge of what human endurance can carry. Her hand presses flat against the surface of the table, her eyes lower. In the gallery, Diana leans toward Maxwell and says something against his ear. He laughs, soft, satisfied, completely at ease. He glances at Eleanor's bowed head and then looks away, the way you look away from something that has already stopped mattering to you. A tear reaches the corner of Eleanor's left eye. She does not let it fall. She breathes. She thinks of her grandmother's voice, Margaret, who has outlasted every single person who ever underestimated her, and she straightens her spine, one vertebra at a time. She picks up her pen. She is alone, completely, visibly, devastatingly alone. And Maxwell Voss, looking at her bowed head from across the aisle, thinks the word finished so clearly it might as well be written across his face in permanent ink. The courtroom doors at the far end of the gallery are closed. For now, the bailiff steps forward. All rise. The room rises. And in the moment of that general movement, in the small window of sound and shuffling that fills a courtroom when 30 people stand simultaneously, the doors at the rear of the gallery open. Not with a bang. Not with a dramatic crash that draws every eye at once. They open slowly, deliberately, with the kind of controlled, unhurried authority that does not need spectacle because it is spectacle, the way a cathedral door opens, the way the first movement of a great symphony begins, quietly, and with the absolute knowledge that everything which follows will be profoundly, irreversibly consequential. The first person through the door is Victor Hartwell, United States Senator. 3 terms. A man whose name appears on legislation that changed lives. A man whose face has been on the cover of Time magazine twice. He is 6'2", broad-shouldered in a charcoal suit of devastating quality, and he is flanked on either side by attorneys. Not junior associates, not paralegal support, but partners, senior partners, from the oldest and most formidable civil litigation firm in the northeastern United States. He walks down the center aisle of the gallery with the measured, unhurried pace of a man who has entered difficult rooms his entire professional life and has never once entered a single one of them apologetically. People notice. Of course they notice. Maxwell's publicist in the gallery looks up from her phone first. Her expression shifts, a flicker of confused recognition crossing her carefully composed face. She leans toward Maxwell's business partner without a word. The business partner turns to look. His face, arranged all afternoon in the comfortable expression of someone watching a foregone conclusion play out exactly as expected, goes absolutely still. The courtroom begins to register. 1 row, then the next. Heads turning. A murmur, barely audible, running through the gallery like an electrical current that no one can quite explain. Victor takes a seat in the front row of the gallery, directly behind Eleanor's table, and sets a leather portfolio on his knee with quiet precision. He does not look at Maxwell. He has not looked at Maxwell once since entering this room. His eyes find Eleanor's back. He waits. Behind Victor, 2 of his attorneys take their positions. And then, the gallery doors open again. Clarence Hartwell enters. He does not rush. He does not perform. He walks the center aisle with his black cane, his father's cane, striking the marble floor in a rhythm as steady and inexorable as a heartbeat. His silver head is level. His back is the back of a man who has carried enormous things and learned over decades to carry them with grace. The Hartwell family resemblance, those cheekbones, those gray eyes, that particular quality of absolute undivided attention is written across his face in lines that have only deepened over 71 years into something that approaches monument. Maxwell Voss sees him, and the careful, constructed confidence of his expression, that half-smile, that comfortable certainty he has worn all day like a second suit, falters, just slightly. The way a flame falters in a sudden wind before it either extinguishes or burns harder and brighter than before. 1 slow blink. His eyes tracking Clarence Hartwell down the aisle. His jaw tightening, almost imperceptibly, but tightening. Maxwell leans toward Roland. His voice, for the first time all day, is not quite steady. Who is that? Roland is already on his phone. The answer comes back in seconds. Roland's expression, polished, professional, unshakable Roland Ashford, undergoes a small, devastating, and very visible change. The color does not exactly leave his face, but something in it recalibrates completely. He looks at the man on his phone screen. He looks up at the man walking the aisle. He looks back at the screen. He says nothing to Maxwell yet. But his posture has changed. And posture never lies. Clarence Hartwell reaches the front row. He takes his seat beside Victor. And then the doors open a 3rd time. And a courtroom, which has been murmuring, which has been adjusting, which has been trying desperately to understand what it is witnessing, goes completely, absolutely, profoundly quiet. Because Margaret Hartwell is here. She is 87 years old. She stands 5 feet tall. She has been alive longer than Maxwell Voss has been relevant. and she moves through that courtroom door with her black ebony cane and her pearl buttons and her white hair set in perfect silver waves, and she does not move quickly. But she moves as though speed were simply beneath her consideration. And the room, the entire room, feels her arrival the way you feel a change in atmospheric pressure. Something fundamental has shifted. Something that cannot be shifted back. Something that was hidden has now fully and permanently arrived. Diana in the gallery has stopped breathing. Her compact is in her hand, forgotten, unopened. Her perfectly arranged face has lost every trace of its arrangement. She is simply staring. Maxwell's business partner rises slightly from his seat, then catches himself, then sits slowly back down. His hand grips the armrest. And Maxwell himself. Maxwell Voss is watching Margaret Hartwell make her way down the center aisle of this courtroom. And the emotion moving across his face is not one thing. It is several things in rapid, devastating succession, like weather moving across an open sky, recognition, then confusion, then calculation, then, and here it comes, slow and enormous and as unavoidable as a tide, understanding. He knows who she is. He has sat at her dinner table. He has performed respect for this woman across 4 Thanksgiving dinners and 7 Christmas gatherings and 1 extremely important family birthday, smiled until his face ached, chosen every word with surgical, self-serving care. He knows who this woman is. And he knows, now, fully, terribly, exactly what it means that she is standing in this courtroom today. Margaret Hartwell reaches the front row of the gallery. She passes the row where Clarence sits. She passes the row where Victor sits. She walks, slowly, regally, with the absolute unhurried certainty of someone who has already determined the outcome of this day, all the way to the gate in the bar. She opens it. She walks through. She crosses the bar, that threshold that separates the gallery from the court itself, the threshold that only officers of the court and permitted parties may cross, and she walks to Eleanor's table. Not a single person in that courtroom makes a sound. Not one. Margaret Hartwell reaches Eleanor's table. She pulls out the empty chair beside her granddaughter. She sits down. She sets her cane carefully against the table edge. She smooths the front of her charcoal jacket with 2 small, deliberate hands. And then she reaches across, and she places her hand, her small, deeply lined, warm, certain, immovable hand, over both of Eleanor's folded hands on the table. Eleanor's face in the moment that touch registers. The storm-gray eyes, held so carefully, so completely controlled for so many hours, filling, not overflowing, filling. She does not cry. She breathes. She straightens. Because Margaret Hartwell's hand on hers is not simply a comfort. It is a declaration. It is a statement made without a single word spoken. You were never alone. You were never going to be left here. We were always coming. Margaret turns her head, slowly, with the precision of a woman who has never wasted a single movement in her 87 years, and she looks directly at Maxwell Voss across the aisle. And Maxwell Voss, for the first time in perhaps his entire adult life, does not know what to do with his face. He is looking at the woman who watched him examine that painting at Thanksgiving dinner and said absolutely nothing. And now, in this courtroom, he finally understands what she was doing. She was not being polite. She was not ignoring him. She was remembering. She was filing it away with the precision of a woman who has spent 87 years understanding that the most powerful thing you can do in a room is know more than everyone else and say nothing until the moment is exactly right. Margaret Hartwell holds Maxwell Voss's gaze for 4 seconds. 4 long, specific, unblinking, devastating seconds. And then she looks away, as if he is simply not worth a fifth. She opens the leather portfolio that Victor has passed forward. She places it on the table before her and Eleanor. Judge Crane adjusts her glasses with 2 precise fingers. Is there a matter the court should address before we proceed? Margaret Hartwell's voice, 87 years old, small as a sparrow, and absolutely, completely, indestructibly unbreakable, fills the courtroom with the clarity of a bell struck in a very large and very quiet place. Yes, Your Honor. My name is Margaret Hartwell. I am the petitioner's grandmother. I will be providing the court with documentation that I believe will significantly reframe these proceedings. She pauses, just for a moment, and in that pause, the entire room holds its breath as one. I have been patient long enough. Roland Ashford is on his feet immediately, objecting. His voice has lost that particular quality of smooth, unhurried control. Something underneath it now. Something that sounds almost like alarm dressed in professional clothing. Your Honor, I must object. This individual has not been identified as a party to these proceedings, and the admission of new documentation at this stage of the hearing, Mr. Ashford. Judge Crane's voice is quiet. It does not need to be loud. I am fully aware of proper procedure. Sit down. Roland Ashford sits down. Victor Hartwell rises from the gallery and addresses the bench, not as a senator, though every single person in the room is thinking that word simultaneously, but as a properly permitted intervening party who has filed, through entirely correct channels, a motion to intervene on behalf of the petitioner. Filed that morning. Through proper process. Every form complete. The motion has already been received. The motion has already been reviewed by the court. Judge Crane was expecting this. Maxwell turns sharply toward Roland. His voice hissed low across the table. You told me you had this covered. You told me she had nothing. Roland's jaw works silently. The junior associate beside them finds something intensely, desperately interesting to examine on the surface of the table. What Margaret has placed on that table, what Eleanor has known was coming all along, what she chose not to use until the moment was irretrievably, perfectly right, is a documentation of 17 years, so comprehensive, so meticulous, so absolutely irrefutable that it does not merely support Eleanor's petition. It dismantles Maxwell's counter-narrative. Brick. By careful brick. Because Eleanor had not only lived those 17 years, she had recorded them. Preserved the early pitch decks she personally wrote under Maxwell's name, the investor emails she drafted in his voice while he attended dinners, the financial restructuring proposal she created when the company was hemorrhaging money in its third year and 2 board members had already quietly discussed dissolution. Letters. Dated. Witnessed. A contribution journal kept in precise daily detail by a woman who, even in love, never quite stopped being a Hartwell, never quite stopped understanding that love requires no documentation, but protection sometimes does, and that the day may come when the truth needs evidence, not just witnesses. Margaret had organized it all. Victor's legal team had filed it, and Eleanor had simply walked into this courtroom on day 1 and waited with complete, quiet patience for the exact right moment to let it speak. Maxwell's face during the reading of the documentation summary is a study in real time, visible collapse. Not the dramatic collapse of a man physically falling, the quieter, more devastating, more permanent collapse of a man watching the story he has told himself, the story he built his entire self-image upon, dissolve into the story that was actually true all along. He told himself Eleanor was nothing. Peripheral. A supportive wife who benefited from his genius. The documents in Margaret Hartwell's portfolio tell a different story entirely. They tell the story of a woman who built the table at which Maxwell Voss sat. Diana, in the gallery, has stopped performing comfort. She sits, very still, hands folded in her lap, the elaborate satisfaction she wore all morning completely gone. Replaced now by the careful, calculating expression of a woman beginning to assess her own proximity to a man who is being publicly, irrevocably, permanently exposed. Maxwell turns to look at Eleanor, really look at her, perhaps for the first time today, and he finds something he did not expect. She is not looking back at him. She is looking at her grandmother. And Margaret, for one single, private, unhurried moment, gives Eleanor's hand one final press. Warm. Decisive. Enough. Before she releases it and turns back to the portfolio, Eleanor picks up her pen. She opens her file, and she begins to speak. Her voice does not waver. It does not need to. Because Eleanor Voss Hartwell is not alone at her table anymore. And the facts she is presenting, the irrefutable, documented 17-year chronicle of her actual contribution to everything Maxwell called his own, land in this courtroom with the full weight of everything she endured and everything her family quietly, steadily, faithfully held in reserve for her. Maxwell Voss's attorney requests a recess. The recess is granted. In the hallway outside, Maxwell Voss, this square-jawed, bespoke-suited, perfectly gray-templed man who walked into this courthouse this morning certain he had already won, stands with his back against the wall and his face in his hands. And not one single person offers him comfort. Not one. The court ruled in Eleanor's favor, not partially, not on a technicality, not as a compromise, fully, comprehensively. With a written judgment that acknowledged 17 years of foundational contribution to the marital estate, contribution that Maxwell Voss's legal team had spent months and considerable money attempting to reduce to nothing. It was not nothing. It was never nothing. 3 weeks later, morning, the Hartwell estate in Connecticut. Eleanor sits at the long mahogany dining table, coffee in both hands. Across from her, Margaret, reading. Beside her, Clarence, reviewing papers. Victor's voice, somewhere deeper in the house, on a phone call that sounds like business being conducted from a position of complete strength. Eleanor looks out the window at the autumn trees, amber and gold and burning, quietly, the way beautiful things burn when they are at the very height of their living. And she thinks about something her grandmother said the morning after the ruling. They were sitting in this same room, these same chairs. And Margaret had looked at her over her coffee cup, with those storm-gray eyes, Eleanor's eyes, older and sharper and carrying a lifetime of choosing wisdom over bitterness, and she had said, "You asked me once why I never said anything that night at Thanksgiving, when I watched that man examining our painting." Eleanor had nodded. Because the right moment to speak is not always the moment that feels urgent. It is the moment that is ready. Eleanor had been ready. And so had they. Here's what Maxwell Voss never understood, what men like Maxwell Voss rarely understand, about women like Eleanor. A woman who comes from something deep does not lose that depth simply because someone stops looking at it. A woman whose roots reach down into bedrock does not become rootless because a man decides her surface is all there is to her. You can leave someone. You cannot leave who they are. You can remove yourself from a table. You cannot erase what was built long before you arrived. Eleanor was never powerless. She was patient. She was strategic. She was her grandmother's granddaughter, her father's daughter. The heir of a bloodline that does not perform its power. It simply, absolutely, quietly is. And when the moment was finally ready, they came. Now, before you go, I want to leave you with 3 questions to carry with you. The first question is this. Have you ever been in a room where someone underestimated you completely and had to choose between defending yourself immediately or waiting until you could do it right? The second question is this. Who is your Margaret? Who is the person in your life, family, mentor, or chosen family, who would walk through doors for you when the moment finally came? The third question is this. If Eleanor had called her family on day 1 instead of facing that courtroom alone first, do you believe the victory would have meant the same thing? Leave your answers in the comments below. This community was built for exactly these kinds of conversations, and if this story touched something in you, something about dignity, about roots, about the quiet and absolute power of knowing where you come from and who stands behind you. Subscribe to Karma's Heiress and turn on your notifications, because we bring you stories exactly like this one every single week. Share this one with someone who needs to be reminded of something important today. Someone who needs to hear this. You are never as alone as they want you to believe. And the people who underestimate you are simply not yet aware of what is about to come through the door. Karma's Heiress. Premium revenge drama. Every story, a reckoning.